In the annals of maritime history, few names resonate quite like Titanic. She was more than just a ship, she was a colossal statement, a testament to human ingenuity and ambition at the dawn of the 20th century. The world watched in awe as this giant took shape, promising unparalleled luxury and speed across the vast Atlantic. She was a floating palace, a symbol of progress, a dream made real in steel and rivets. Many believed her to be the ultimate triumph of technology over nature, virtually unsinkable in her might. The era in which Titanic was conceived was one of immense optimism and industrial prowess. Great Britain stood at the forefront of shipbuilding, and Belfast, in particular, was a powerhouse of maritime construction. The White Star Line, her owners, sought to dominate the lucrative transatlantic passenger trade. They envisioned a trio of liners, Olympic, Titanic and Britannic, each larger and more opulent than any that had come before. These ships were to be the embodiment of Edwardian confidence, a bold declaration of mastery over the formidable ocean. The very air hummed with the promise of new horizons and faster connections. Titanic represented the hopes and aspirations of thousands. For her wealthy first-class passengers, she offered a journey in unparalleled splendor with fine dining, Turkish baths and elegant suites. For those in second and third class, she represented a passage to a new life, a chance for prosperity and fresh beginnings in America. The ship was a microcosm of society, carrying souls from all walks of life, each with their own story, their own dreams for the future. She was a vessel of ambition, bound for the new world. Yet this magnificent creation, this symbol of human achievement, was destined for a tragic fate. Her maiden voyage, anticipated with such excitement, would end in disaster. The story of Titanic is not just one of engineering marvel, but also one of profound loss and human frailty. It serves as a stark reminder that even the grandest of human endeavors can be humbled by the raw power of the natural world. The dream of Titanic would, in a few short days, collide with an icy, unforgiving reality in the cold North Atlantic. The vision for Titanic began with the White Star Line's fierce rivalry with the Cunard Line. Cunard had launched Lusitania and Mauretania, celebrated for their speed and luxury. To compete, White Star Line chairman J. Bruce Ismay and Lord Peary of the Harland and Wolff shipyard in Belfast conceived a new class of liner. These ships would prioritize size and comfort over outright speed, offering an experience unlike any other. The Olympic-class liners were born from this ambitious plan, with Titanic set to be the jewel in the crown, the grandest of them all. Construction of Titanic commenced on the 31st of March 1909 at the Harland and Wolff shipyard in Belfast, Northern Ireland. It was a monumental undertaking. Thousands of skilled workers, from platers to riveters, carpenters to electricians, poured their labor into her vast hull. The scale was breathtaking. Slipway number 3 had to be specially reinforced to accommodate her immense weight. Day by day, the steel skeleton rose, gradually taking the form of the great ship. The air was filled with the clang of hammers and the roar of furnaces, a symphony of industrial creation. Titanic's design incorporated some of the latest maritime safety features of the time. She was famously divided into 16 watertight compartments. These compartments were designed so that if a few were breached, the ship could still remain afloat. This led to the popular, though ultimately misguided, belief that she was unsinkable. Her hull was constructed with thick steel plates held together by over 3 million rivets. Every detail, from the powerful reciprocating engines and the revolutionary turbine engine, was engineered for reliability and smooth sailing, intended to provide comfort and security to all aboard. The sheer dimensions of the vessel were astounding for the era. Titanic measured 882 feet and 9 inches in length, or about 269 meters. Her breadth was 92 feet and 6 inches, roughly 28 meters. From keel to the top of her funnels, she stood over 175 feet tall, equivalent to an 11-story building. Her gross registered tonnage was over 46,000 tons, making her the largest man-made moving object on Earth at the time of her launch. This colossal size contributed to her aura of invincibility and grandeur. The launch of Titanic's hull into the River Lagan on the 31st of May 1911 was a major public event. Thousands gathered in Belfast to witness the spectacle. It took just over a minute for the vast structure to slide gracefully into the water, a moment of immense pride for her builders. However, this was only the beginning. The empty shell then had to be fitted out, a complex process that would take nearly a year. This involved installing her enormous engines, her luxurious interiors, and all the intricate systems required for a transatlantic liner. Inside, Titanic was a masterpiece of Edwardian craftsmanship and opulence. The first-class accommodations were designed to rival the finest hotels in Europe. There was a grand staircase, crowned with a glass dome, a Parisian-style cafe, a swimming pool, and even a squash court. Second-class passengers enjoyed comforts that would have been considered first-class on many other liners. Even third-class or steerage offered clean and respectable quarters, far superior to those on older ships. Every detail was considered, ensuring the maiden voyage would be an unforgettable experience for all. Commanding this magnificent vessel was Captain Edward John Smith. He was a highly respected senior captain of the White Star Line with decades of experience at sea. At 62 years old, this voyage was intended to be his glorious finale before a well-earned retirement. He was a popular figure known as the millionaire's captain due to his rapport with wealthy passengers. His presence at the helm further instilled confidence in Titanic's safety and the smooth running of her first journey across the Atlantic Ocean. Few could have foreseen the terrible burden that would soon fall upon his shoulders. On the 10th of April 1912, RMS Titanic was ready for her maiden voyage. She departed from Southampton, England, amidst cheering crowds and a flurry of excitement. The air was thick with anticipation and farewells. After brief stops in Cherbourg, France, to pick up more passengers, and then Queenstown, now Cove in Ireland, the great liner finally turned her bow westwards. She steamed out into the vast expanse of the Atlantic, carrying over 2,200 souls, passengers and crew, on a journey that promised adventure and new beginnings, but would ultimately become a legend of tragedy. The first few days of Titanic's transatlantic crossing were remarkably smooth and uneventful. The weather was generally fine, and the mighty ship sliced through the waves with impressive stability. Passengers settled into the routine of life aboard the luxurious liner. First-class travelers enjoyed the ship's many amenities, from leisurely promenades on deck to elegant dinners in the grand dining saloon. Those in second and third class also found comfort and camaraderie, sharing stories and dreams of the new lives awaiting them in America. The ship was performing magnificently, a true queen of the ocean. As Titanic ventured further into the North Atlantic, her wireless Marconi room began to receive messages from other ships. These messages carried warnings of ice. Navigating these northern routes in April often meant encountering icebergs and sea ice drifting south from the Arctic. Several ships in the vicinity reported sighting large ice fields and bergs directly in Titanic's path. These crucial warnings were passed to the bridge, noted by the officers. However, the ship continued to maintain a high speed, around 22 knots, a common practice at the time to ensure timely arrivals. The decision to maintain this speed, despite multiple ice warnings, has been a subject of much debate. Some argue it was standard procedure driven by the desire to make good time on a maiden voyage. Others suggest a degree of complacency, perhaps fueled by the ship's supposed unsinkable design. The wireless operators employed by the Marconi Company rather than directly by the White Star Line were also busy sending and receiving passengers' personal telegrams. It's possible that the sheer volume of these private messages sometimes overshadowed the urgency of the ice warnings. On the night of Sunday, 14th of April 1912, the conditions for spotting ice became particularly challenging. The sea was unusually calm, described by survivors as being like a mill pond. Without waves breaking at the base of an iceberg, it would be much harder to see, especially on a moonless night. The air temperature dropped significantly as Titanic entered the region known to contain ice. Despite these ominous signs and the earlier warnings, the great liner steamed onward into the darkness, unaware of the silent, colossal threat that lay directly in her path. Section 5. The Fateful Encounter, a Brush with Disaster. High in the crow's nest, lookouts Frederick Fleet and Reginald Lee scanned the dark horizon. Their task was made more difficult by the lack of binoculars, a crucial oversight as they had reportedly been misplaced. At 11:40 p.m. ship's time, Fleet suddenly spotted a dark mass directly ahead. It was an iceberg. He immediately rang the warning bell 3 times and telephoned the bridge, shouting, "Iceberg, right ahead!" The message was relayed to First Officer William Murdoch, who was then in charge on the bridge. He reacted instantly, ordering the ship hard a starboard and the engines to be put full astern. The massive liner began to turn, but her sheer size and speed meant she could not maneuver quickly enough. Titanic was simply too grand, too heavy to avoid the looming danger in the short distance available. Instead of a head-on collision which might have damaged only a few forward compartments, the ship's starboard side scraped along the submerged portion of the iceberg. The impact was not a violent crash, but more of a prolonged, ominous shudder that ran through the vessel. Many passengers, already in their cabins for the night, barely noticed it or dismissed it as a minor incident. Below the waterline, however, the damage was severe. The iceberg had punched and buckled the steel plates along a length of nearly 300 feet, opening up at least 5, possibly 6, of the ship's 16 watertight compartments to the sea. Captain Smith, alerted by the impact, rushed to the bridge. He was soon joined by Thomas Andrews, the ship's principal designer from Harland and Wolff, who was on board to observe her maiden voyage. Together they made a rapid inspection of the damage, descending to the lower decks to see the water pouring in. The grim reality quickly became apparent. Thomas Andrews, after a swift calculation, delivered the devastating news to Captain Smith. The Titanic could float with her first 4 compartments breached, or even her first 2 and part of a third. But with 5, and possibly more compromised, the mathematical certainty was that she would sink. He estimated she had perhaps an hour, maybe 2, before she would founder. The unsinkable ship was doomed. The captain, faced with an unimaginable crisis, knew he had to give the order to abandon ship. Section 6. Descending into history. Titanic's final hours. Once the terrible truth of Titanic's mortal wound was understood, Captain Smith ordered the wireless operators, Jack Phillips and Harold Bride, to send out distress signals. They began transmitting CQD, the standard distress call, soon followed by SOS, the newer signal, desperately trying to reach any ship that might be close enough to help. Several ships received the calls, including the Cunard liner Carpathia, which immediately altered course and began racing towards Titanic's reported position, some 58 nautical miles away. But the journey would take hours through dangerous ice fields. Meanwhile, on deck, the order was given to uncover the lifeboats and begin loading passengers, women and children first. However, a critical flaw in Titanic's design and safety preparations became horrifyingly clear. There were not enough lifeboats for everyone on board. The regulations at the time based lifeboat capacity on a ship's tonnage, not its passenger count. Titanic, therefore, legally carried enough lifeboats for a ship of her size according to outdated rules, but these could only accommodate roughly half of the 2,200 people on the vessel. This shortage would prove to be a fatal factor. The process of loading the lifeboats was fraught with confusion, indecision, and, in some instances, panic. Many passengers were initially reluctant to leave the perceived safety of the massive liner for small open boats lowered into the freezing darkness. Some early lifeboats were launched tragically underfilled as crew members struggled to persuade people to board. As the ship's bow dipped further into the icy water and her angle became more severe, the urgency of the situation became undeniable. The ship's band famously played on deck, a poignant effort to maintain calm amidst the growing chaos. As the minutes ticked by, Titanic's bow sank deeper and deeper. The water crept up the decks, engulfing more of the ship. The stern rose high into the air, silhouetted against the starry sky. Then, with a series of deafening roars believed to be the sound of her boilers breaking loose and crashing through the hull, or the ship itself breaking apart, the lights flickered and died, plunging the scene into terrifying darkness. At approximately 2:20 a.m. on April 15, 1912, just 2 hours and 40 minutes after striking the iceberg, RMS Titanic slipped beneath the waves and vanished into the frigid depths of the Atlantic. Section 7. Hope in the Darkness, Rescue, and the Stories of Survivors. The RMS Carpathia, under the command of Captain Arthur Rostron, was the first vessel to arrive at the scene of the disaster. She had pushed her engines to their limits, navigating treacherous ice fields in the dark at high speed. Around 4 a.m., nearly an hour and a half after Titanic had foundered, Carpathia reached the coordinates given in the distress calls. Her crew and passengers witnessed a heartbreaking sight, a scattering of lifeboats filled with cold, shocked and grieving survivors, adrift on a calm but freezing sea. The task of rescue began immediately in the pre-dawn gloom. Those in the lifeboats had endured an unimaginable ordeal. They had watched their magnificent ship, a beacon of light and life, disappear into the black ocean. They had heard the cries of those left in the water, sounds that would haunt them for the rest of their days. The temperature of the seawater was well below freezing, around -2 degrees Celsius, meaning survival in the water was a matter of mere minutes. The occupants of the lifeboats, many inadequately dressed for the bitter cold, huddled together for warmth, awaiting rescue with a mixture of fading hope and profound despair. Amongst the survivors were countless stories of courage, sacrifice, and heartbreaking loss. There were tales of husbands ensuring their wives and children were safe in lifeboats, knowing they themselves would not survive. Second Officer Charles Lightoller, the most senior officer to survive, took charge of an overturned collapsible lifeboat, guiding the men balanced precariously upon it. The ship's musicians, led by Wallace Hartley, reportedly played hymns to calm passengers as the ship sank, an act of stoicism that became legendary. Conversely, there were also accounts of panic and desperation as the final moments unfolded. In the end, only around 705 people were rescued by the Carpathia from the lifeboats. More than 1,500 souls, men, women, and children, perished in the disaster. The sheer scale of the loss was staggering, sending shockwaves around the world. The Carpathia, now a rescue ship carrying the traumatized survivors and the heavy news of the tragedy, turned slowly and began her somber journey to New York. The world awaited, unaware of the full extent of the catastrophe that had befallen the unsinkable Titanic in the icy Atlantic. Section 8. The Reckoning, Investigations and Lessons Learned. The arrival of the Carpathia in New York on April 18, 1912, was met with an outpouring of public grief and an immediate demand for answers. How could such a technologically advanced ship, proclaimed to be the pinnacle of safety, sink on her maiden voyage with such catastrophic loss of life? Official inquiries were swiftly launched on both sides of the Atlantic. The United States Senate initiated an investigation almost immediately, followed by a British Wreck Commissioner's inquiry in London. These proceedings sought to uncover the causes and failings that led to the disaster. The inquiries heard testimony from surviving crew members, passengers, and experts. Key findings pointed to a confluence of factors. The Titanic's excessive speed in a known ice region was heavily criticized. The insufficient number of lifeboats was a glaring deficiency, although the ship technically met the outdated regulations of the time. The failure of some crew to effectively manage the evacuation and fully load the lifeboats that were available also contributed to the high death toll. Furthermore, it was noted that the wireless warnings about ice had not always been given the priority they deserved on the bridge. The Titanic disaster served as a brutal catalyst for significant changes in maritime safety regulations. One of an immediate and lasting impact was the establishment of the International Ice Patrol in 1914, an organization tasked with monitoring iceberg dangers in the North Atlantic and warning shipping. Regulations regarding lifeboat capacity were overhauled, mandating that all ships carry enough lifeboats for every single person on board. Furthermore, lifeboat drills and crew training was standardized and made more rigorous, ensuring better preparedness for emergencies. Radio silence for distress signals also became a critical protocol. The sinking of the Titanic delivered a profound and humbling lesson to an age that had perhaps grown overly confident in its technological prowess. The term unsinkable was exposed as a dangerous fallacy. The tragedy underscored the immense power of nature and the inherent risks of ocean travel, regardless of human ingenuity. It highlighted the critical importance of vigilance, preparedness, and adherence to safety protocols. The loss of the Titanic was not just a maritime accident. It was a moment that forced a re-evaluation of priorities, ensuring that such a disaster would hopefully never be repeated on such a scale. Section 9. Echoes from the Deep Remembering Titanic. For over 70 years, the exact resting place of the RMS Titanic remained a mystery. hidden beneath more than 2 miles of water in the forbidding darkness of the North Atlantic seabed. Then in 1985, a joint French-American expedition led by Dr. Robert Ballard and Jean-Louis Michel finally located the wreck. The images they captured were haunting, the ghostly bow section remarkably preserved in some aspects, and the devastated stern, evidence of the violent forces that tore the ship apart during her final descent. The discovery reignited global fascination with the Titanic story. The tale of Titanic has endured, captivating generation after generation. It has been recounted in countless books, scholarly articles, poems, songs, and perhaps most famously, in blockbuster films. Museums around the world host exhibitions dedicated to the ship, displaying recovered artifacts and telling the stories of those who sailed on her. This enduring fascination stems not just from the scale of the tragedy, but from the human dramas that unfolded, the acts of heroism, the stark class divisions reflected in survival rates, and the sheer hubris that preceded the fall. Beyond the grand narrative of the ship itself, it is crucial to remember the individuals. Each of the 1,500 lives lost represented a unique story, a family shattered and dreams unfulfilled. From wealthy industrialists like John Jacob Astor IV to the many hopeful emigrants in third class seeking a new life in America, their experiences form the true heart of the Titanic legend. Memorials stand in various cities connected to the ship, such as Belfast, Southampton, and Queenstown, serving as poignant reminders of the human cost of that fateful night in April 1912. The Titanic tragedy is a timeless chronicle. It speaks of human ambition reaching for the stars, only to be reminded of its earthly limitations. It is a story of technological marvel and human error, of immense courage and profound loss. The echoes from the deep from that cold night so long ago continue to resonate with us today. They serve as a solemn lesson, a tribute to those who perished, and a powerful reminder of the enduring power of the human spirit in the face of adversity. The great ship may be gone, but her story and the lessons she imparted sail on in our collective memory.